Breaking right now, U.S. F-35 stealth jets were detected near Caribbean airspace.
5 F-35 stealth jets just sliced through the Caribbean night, and Maduro is furious.
We have declared maximum preparedness for the defense of Venezuela.
Across Caracas, warplanes are scrambling, troops are on high alert, and Maduro has given himself special powers to defend the nation, calling this the start of a fight for sovereignty. But Trump isn't backing off.
Now we'll have to start looking about the land because they'll be forced to go by land.
So, is this just political theater or the first spark of a war neither side can control? Let's break it down. The morning after the F-35s were spotted, Venezuela woke up to panic and defiance. Inside the defense ministry, phones rang non-stop. Orders echoed down concrete corridors. The atmosphere was electric and terrified. Defense Minister Vladimir Padrino Lopez didn't mince words. These are combat aircraft that U.S. imperialism has dared to bring close to Venezuelan shores. This is not an exercise. This is an act of war. His words struck like thunder. Across Venezuela, televisions flickered with his warning. Phrases like unauthorized incursion, provocation, and threat to national security blasted across the ticker. We're watching them, and I want you to know, this doesn't intimidate us. It doesn't intimidate the people of Venezuela. He accused Washington of military harassment and imperialist aggression. Within hours, Maduro ordered every border garrison on full alert. Air defense systems were activated around Caracas and along the Caribbean coast. Convoys moved through the capital, soldiers in black masks, rifles slung tight, ready for a fight they hoped wouldn't come. In Washington, officials shrugged it off, calling the F-35 flyovers routine patrols. But in Caracas, the regime saw something else, a warning shot, maybe even a rehearsal for invasion.
Nosotros constantemente vivimos al día a día en la incertidumbre porque realmente no sabemos qué va a pasar. Entonces, ¿qué es lo que sí depende de nosotros? Hacer nuestro día a día como lo seguimos llevando.
And they had every reason to be afraid, because the U.S. had already proven exactly what it was willing to do when the ocean turned red. The first strike took everyone by surprise. September 1st, 2025. A lone boat sliced across the Caribbean, then vanished in a ball of fire. 11 people died instantly. Trump released a video of the strike himself, claiming the target was loaded with drugs and run by Venezuela's most feared criminal network, Tren de Aragua.
We just, over the last few minutes, literally shot out a drug-carrying boat, a lot of drugs in that boat.
Just 2 weeks later, on September 15th, Trump announced a second strike. This time, another vessel transporting illicit drugs from Venezuela. 3 men were killed. Hours later, Trump doubled down, posting in all caps, "Be warned, if you are transporting drugs that can kill Americans, we are hunting you." Then came more explosions. 2, maybe 3, each strike more daring than the last, each one killing what Trump called narco-terrorists. The latest hit came just off Venezuela's coast. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth even posted the video himself. A boat, a flash, and then silence. His caption read, 4 male narco-terrorists aboard the vessel were killed in the strike. The operation was conducted in international waters just off the coast of Venezuela. In total, the U.S. has launched 5 strikes, killing 21 people. Intelligence officials insist those boats weren't just smugglers, they were cartel-run, trafficking cocaine through Venezuelan waters. A not-so-subtle jab at Nicolas Maduro, who's long been accused of turning his country into a narco-state.
The Navy has supported our mission to blow the cartel terrorists the hell out of the water. You see that? And you know, there are no boats in the water anymore. You can't find any. We're having a hard time finding them.
But these aren't arrests anymore. This is lethal force, justified by a new loophole. By labeling traffickers as unlawful combatants, the U.S. now claims the right to strike anywhere, anytime, without warning.
If you are not at war, you cannot use lethal force as a first measure against anybody. We are at peace. Drug smugglers are criminals. As with any other criminal, we can't just kill them because we see them.
Legal experts warn it's setting a dangerous precedent because not everyone out there is a trafficker. Some are just fishermen, now too afraid to set sail.
We're so good at it that there are no boats. In fact, even fishing boats, nobody wants to go into the water anymore. Sorry to tell you that.
And here's the chilling part. Trump says the sea strikes were just the beginning. If traffickers stop using the ocean, he plans to take the fight inland.
They're not coming in by sea anymore, so now we'll have to start looking about the land because they'll be forced to go by land. And let me tell you right now, that's not going to work out well for him either.
But here's the thing. This war didn't start with one missile or one order. The bad blood between Trump and Maduro runs deeper. It started years ago with a bounty, a betrayal, and a man who disappeared when the stakes got too high. And that man was supposed to bring Maduro down. Venezuela is collapsing under the weight of its own crisis. More than 20 million people now live in poverty, hungry, desperate, and forgotten. Hospitals have no medicine. Families survive on rice and hope. Since 2014, over 8 million Venezuelans have fled, one of the largest mass migrations in modern history. Some trek through jungles. Others pay $5,000 for what smugglers call the VIP route, a flight to skip the suffering. Different paths, same goal: escape.
And the routes these migrants take to get to the U.S. is treacherous, it's risky.
And then came 2025, another election, another crisis. Maduro declared victory again, in a vote observers say was rigged before it even began. Protesters hit the streets and were met with batons and bullets. By the time the smoke cleared, 24 were dead and more than 2,000 arrested.
I've been accused of terrorism. The dictatorship has said that they are looking for me and that they want to get me as soon as possible.
Opposition leader Maria Corina Machado, hunted by Maduro's agents. Meanwhile, in the borderlands, law and order belong to someone else. In Táchira, cartel enforcers and corrupt soldiers rule side by side. Colombian and Gulf cartel gunmen patrol highways, collect tolls, and kill anyone who resists. And yet, Maduro still stood.
Maduro is an illegitimate ruler, a tyrant who brutalizes his people. But Maduro's grip on tyranny will be smashed and broken.
Trump's feud with Maduro isn't new. In 2018, he recognized Juan Guaidó as Venezuela's rightful president, turning a diplomatic standoff into an international showdown. Behind the scenes, U.S. intelligence launched Operation Freedom, a secret attempt to trigger a military revolt, but it collapsed before it began. The generals stayed loyal, Guaidó vanished, and the dream of freedom burned out in the streets of Caracas. Then Washington went nuclear. In 2020, the U.S. formally indicted Maduro for narco-terrorism, accusing him of flooding America with cocaine through cartel pipelines.
Maduro and his other defendants have betrayed the Venezuelan people and corrupted Venezuela's institutions.
The bounty, $15 million, later raised to $50, more than what America once offered for Osama bin Laden.
Maduro uses foreign terrorist organizations like TDA, Sinaloa, and Cartel of the Suns to bring deadly drugs and violence into our country.
Trump called it a war on drugs, but everyone knew he meant war, period.
The enemies of all humanity. For this reason, we've recently begun using the supreme power of the United States military.
And he wasn't bluffing. Today, 4,500 U.S. Marines and Navy personnel are deployed across the Caribbean. Destroyers, warships, even a nuclear submarine standing by. 10 F-35 stealth fighters now patrol from Puerto Rico, faster, deadlier, and ready to strike within minutes. But here's the twist. Maduro isn't backing down. He's calling Trump's bluff, and his next move could turn the Caribbean into a war zone. The air in Caracas was electric, tense, heavy, and humming with fear. After a week of U.S. airstrikes on Venezuelan boats, Maduro finally broke his silence.
We have begun the process to consider a constitutional decree declaring a state of emergency due to an external threat, in line with the Constitution, to protect our people, our peace, and our stability.
His words echoed through living rooms across the country. For some, it was defiance. For others, it was a declaration of war. Maduro went further, signing a decree that granted himself special powers to act in defense and security if the U.S. dares to attack our homeland.
The decree would have wide-reaching effects if Venezuela were to be attacked militarily by the United States.
And it wasn't just talk. Within hours, over 2,500 troops and militias were deployed across the northern coastline. Warships rolled out into the Caribbean. Anti-air systems reactivated around Caracas. Maduro called it defensive readiness. Washington called it an overreaction. Since the conflict began, Venezuela claims to have mobilized over 4 million militia members, training them for a war they hope never comes. But behind closed doors, Maduro's tone was very different. Desperate to cool tensions, he quietly reached out, not just to the UN and the Pope, but to Trump himself. According to sources, he offered what no one expected, a deal. He proposed redirecting Venezuelan oil exports away from China and back to the US, granting American firms priority access to Venezuela's oil and gold reserves, even scaling down existing deals with Russia and Iran. He also promised to share data proving Venezuela's non-involvement in drug trafficking, a direct counter to Trump's claim that his regime was running a narco-terrorist network, but the White House didn't bite. By early October 2025, Washington cut off diplomatic talks, citing Maduro's refusal to resign and his continued denial of drug ties.
We'll see what happens with Venezuela. Venezuela's been very dangerous.
Meanwhile, in the shadows, the resistance is stirring. Maria Corina Machado, still in hiding, told reporters that the U.S. military buildup had reignited the movement. Thousands have joined the underground resistance in just weeks, more than in the past 6 months combined. She confirmed secret talks with U.S. officials about what comes after Maduro, but made one thing crystal clear: this can't be America's fight. That's a task for the Venezuelan people. Still, even Maduro's enemies are nervous. Experts warn this could spiral into another endless war.
There's always a danger of things developing into a quagmire when you go into a place thinking that you're going to come out with a decisive result.
People do want Maduro removed. That's the thing. And I think it would be well perceived if the US finally does it. The thing is that most people don't think about the day after and how complicated that day after can be.
And then, just when it seemed like tensions couldn't stretch any tighter, Caracas made a shocking announcement. Something was coming, and this time, it wouldn't just be words. Interior Minister Diosdado Cabello stepped before reporters, eyes hard, voice steady. We've uncovered a plot to attack the U.S. Embassy in Caracas, an attack involving lethal explosives. He claimed Venezuelan security forces had already sent a warning letter to Washington and that U.S. officials had received and taken it seriously. On paper, it sounded like cooperation, but Cabello's tone? It wasn't diplomatic, it was defiant. Then came the twist. Without presenting a shred of evidence, Cabello named 2 suspects, Maria Corina Machado, the same opposition leader still in hiding, and Ivan Simonovis, a former police commissioner turned government critic. He accused them of being architects of violent acts, claiming their desperation had driven them to extreme measures. The timing couldn't have been more suspicious. The announcement dropped just as pressure on Maduro's government hit its peak. Then, Maduro himself took the mic.
There was indeed a highly credible and extremely destructive threat emanating from the dangerous and well-known terrorist group that was in charge of these kinds of things.
He said he'd personally ordered Jorge Rodriguez to contact U.S. officials through every possible channel and had given them the names, the meeting times, and even the identities of those allegedly involved. But no arrests, no proof, no evidence.
Names, surnames, time of the meeting, and what was discussed and where it was discussed concerning this attack, which was endorsed by a person whose identity will soon to be revealed.
So now the question isn't who planned the attack, it's why announce it now. Because to some observers, this wasn't a warning, it was a distraction, a smokescreen from a regime on the brink. The shockwaves from the Caribbean strikes rippled across the globe. At the United Nations, diplomats spoke in hushed tones, not just about what happened, but what could happen next. UN envoy Miroslav Jenca called on both sides to exercise maximum restraint and settle their differences through peaceful means. He warned that even in the fight against organized crime, the law still matters.
It is imperative for member states to ensure that their actions to combat drug trafficking are carried out in accordance with international law, including the UN Charter.
Jenca's message was clear. No one is denying the threat of cartel violence, but drone strikes and sea explosions. That's not how international law works. Behind the diplomatic language, the tension was thick. Everyone in that chamber knew what he was really saying. America has crossed a line. And then Russia weighed in. Their tone wasn't diplomatic. It was furious. Moscow accused Washington of adopting a shoot-first mentality, condemning the U.S. for heinous acts in international waters. They voiced full support for Venezuela's sovereign right to defend itself. To the Kremlin, Trump's war on cartels wasn't counter-narcotics, it was aggression, and they made it clear Venezuela would not stand alone. But not everyone was cheering Maduro on. Even U.S. allies like France, Greece, and Denmark stepped in, urging restraint and strict respect for international norms. They didn't back the strikes, but they didn't condemn Trump outright either. Their message? Cool the fire before it spreads, because the longer Washington and Caracas lock eyes across those waters, the smaller the room for diplomacy becomes. And if neither side blinks soon, the world won't just be watching a standoff, it'll be trapped in a war no one can stop.